Hello, my name is Scott Gibson with Beneath the Surface. I'm here with Eric Coffin of Hard Rock Analyst Newsletter. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Scott.
Thanks for being with me.
Thank you.
Now, wanted to ask you, we're here now in a bear market in the gold mining stocks and the juniors particularly, and we're in the middle of the summer doldrums. Does anyone care right now about what's happening in our market? Not
many. People who are optimistic have said that they expect things to start going up in the fall, which I'd put myself in that camp. Mm-hmm. Really, especially when it's a bear market, people tend to not care at all in the summer. The one interesting thing I've noticed in the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks is, 6 or 8 companies, I guess, have put out, good drill results, and the market actually cared about those companies. And I consider that positive because the market hasn't really cared about anything really from February to June. It didn't really matter what anybody put out. It was all just a liquidity event. In the past 2 or 3 weeks, you've seen a few companies, not many, admittedly, but a few companies put out drill results, and one, they would get a big boost in trading and in price, but unlike 3 months ago or 6 months ago or 12 months ago, some of these guys have been able to hold those gains, which just wasn't happening before. And I take that as a positive sign. There's obviously people out there on the sidelines looking for something. Show me something that I can throw some money at. Show me something I can trade. And those people are around. And I think in order for a broader audience to show up, macroeconomic conditions can change. Gold can go to $10 million, whatever. But really, in this kind of market, in my experience, what tends to put a bottom in is 3 or 4 or 5 companies making a discovery that brings the greed back, not to put too fine a point on it, where people see a stock go from 10 cents to $3 and then they remember why you roll the dice on these things. And we're seeing some of that start to happen with some of these companies. We'll come back to that in a minute, but I'd like to focus a little bit first on your perception of the macro, or what's going on in the bigger picture that is giving you the sense, and I agree with this, that things are going to start to pick up in the fall, September, October, somewhere in that range. I think in the last 3-4 weeks you've seen central banks in the US, the ECB, Bank of England, Bank of China, Bank of South Korea, Bank of Australia, Bank of Japan, all of them have started more stimulus measures. I mean, that in and of itself, of course, isn't like a really good news story. I mean, they're doing it for a reason. It's because they're seeing things they don't like out there. Mm-hmm. But when I look at the backdrop, there's been a lot of slowing in the U.S., but I think there's a couple of things that have been creating that. Some of it's just Europe that really kind of overhangs things, and it's making employers nervous. I think the so-called fiscal cliff in the U.S., where on January 1st there's really quite large budget cuts kick in automatically. I think that's making a lot of people nervous because that's effectively a 2% cut to the GDP. Do I think that's going to happen? No, because I think they'll kick the can down the road because that's what they do in Washington. Well, and that ties into the political question of the U.S. election coming in the fall. What's that going to do for our industry, for gold stocks? Is it going to have an effect leading up to it, or is it post-election that's a bigger concern? I suspect unless somebody really flubs one of the two of them, I think the numbers are going to be close enough that you may not see big impact until the actual election results are in. I think the U.S., it's a slow patch, but I think if you see Europe get off the front pages and a bit of stimulus out of China, I think that'll pick the States up a little bit. I mean, I'm fairly encouraged by things like housing starts. You see stimulus coming in China. Do you see stimulus coming out of the U.S.? I think it's going to depend on how things pan out in the election, but I think if the employment numbers get much worse, I think the Fed's going to feel compelled to do something. Mm-hmm. The testimony that Bernanke did the last couple of days in front of his semi-annual testimony, and Humphrey Hawkins in front of the Congress, I mean, it was his usual answer. If things get bad, I'll do something. There's no real specifics. I'm not sure QE3, maybe, but I think they'll probably come up with something. They don't seem to be that worried about being able to shrink their balance sheet when the time comes, and it's getting a little close to an election, and that's the tricky part, is does it happen before or after the election, because the Fed does not want to be seen as being political, and it's hard to escape that if you do something within a month or 2 months of the election. So if we don't see something by the end of August, I think we might have to wait till December. But if things got really bad, I think they'll do something. Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, moving back to the companies, we're starting to see some traction on some of these gold stocks and some of the other companies. Do you want to comment on a few of those in particular?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of ones that are on our list, I mean, one that's made made a pretty big splash in the last month is a company called GoldQuest. David and I started following that company 6 years ago, and it's funny. It's kind of like deja vu all over again. A month after we started following it, they pulled this huge hole in one of their properties, and the stock went from 30 cents to $1.80, and they raised a bunch of money, and everybody was happy. And then over the course of the next 3 years, it settled back to about 60 cents, because in that case, and they knew fairly quickly that they'd probably drill down something, like really the second hole they knew they'd drill down something. It was a different type of deposit, but what we liked about those guys is it's in the Dominican Republic. It's not the fastest place to do things. It's got a reputation for being kind of slow bureaucratically, but they do have a pretty good attitude towards mining. I mean, it's a country where you do have a lot of parks and stuff, but you sort of know what you're dealing with, and they are pretty pro-development. What's going on there right now is there's a deposit in the center of the country called Pueblo Viejo. It's a huge gold deposit, 20 million ounces. Barrick and Goldcorp, it's a joint venture they're redeveloping, and it's about a $3 billion project. That'll be in production late this year, and it's going to have a huge impact on their economy. I mean, an economy the size of the DR is adding, $1 billion a year in revenue out of Pueblo Viejo. I mean, it's a huge impact on their economy, and it's a lot of jobs. In the past, that was sort of the focus area. Everybody was kind of working around Pueblo Viejo and those rocks, looking for this other one. Really, this company, GoldQuest, which had gone in years ago and done these big regional surveys, and they got a lot of good gold numbers in this other belt of rocks called the Torreo Volcanics, which is about 100 kilometers more or less to the west. They drilled a few things. I mean, went through crappy markets. They did a joint venture with Goldfields. Goldfields earned in, and then they actually bought the projects back from Goldfields to go back to 100%. And in the meantime, they had found 2 or 3 fairly good-looking, interesting early-stage things in this one stretch of volcanics. They've got about a 40-kilometer stretch of properties. The most northerly one was called the Scandalosa. They went in there and they did a bunch of drilling last year and the year before that. They put together about 400,000 ounce resource. It's a nice resource, 4 or 5 grams, shallow, basically flat-lying thing. This year, like everybody else, they got beaten to death, and basically the insiders and a couple of the big shareholders kind of sucked it up and did a placement of 10 cents, and they went in to do some more drilling there, and it was really like Hail Mary hole, second last drill hole, empty bank account. They drilled this new area called Romero.
And the stock traded down to 4 cents too.
Down to 4 cents, and it was 7 cents when they put out this drill hole, which was 240 meters of 2.4 grams and 0.6, I think it was, copper. Amazing drill hole, just amazing drill hole.
Yeah, full disclosure, I own GoldQuest.
And so do I. Both of us do. We're both happy about this.
Yes.
And this was one of the first examples where the stock went from 7.5 cents to 30 cents in one day. And just about everybody's going, okay, it's going to go back to 20 cents, 50, and here we go again, like we've seen for the last 2 years. Well, it didn't. I mean, it basically kept going. They raised $6.5 million at 45 cents, no warrants. They're back in there now drilling with 2 drills. They just put out the second drill hole. I mean, the big question, whenever you get a hole like this, you never know whether it's a one-hole wonder. The company doesn't know. You only have one drill hole. You don't know what the job is.
Did they go down the structure?
Did you go down something? You don't know. Yeah. They didn't think so, but you never know until they put more holes in it. So they put out a second hole yesterday, 25 meters to the west of the first one. Again, pretty amazing. 150 meters of 4, was it?
4.5 grams.
Yeah, 4.5 grams, and again, like 0.6 copper. There were some really, really nice grade zones in there. There was one zone that was like 20 meters of 30 grams, give or take. There were a couple of zones. There was a high-ish grade copper zone with that, but there's also a couple of zones with less gold where you've got like a couple of % copper, or like 20 meters, like separate zones. Like really impressive drill hole. The stock's trading at $1.10 now. It's probably traded 200 million shares since that hole came out.
There's 110 million shares out in the company, approximately.
Yeah.
So it's turned over.
It's turned over the whole float. There's two rigs going now. Basically, they've done 25-meter step outs in every direction. They're trying to figure out what this thing looks like. Those holes are done. They're in the lab. The 2 rigs have moved out now again, doing bigger step outs to the north and east, and they're just going to keep going. They're bringing in a bigger drill rig so they can drill deeper. One of the things that's interesting about this property is when you look at the geophysics, and it was geophysics where they targeted this, it was an IP target. If you go back to Escandalosa, the whole point to drilling Escandalosa is let's try to find a good grade, really shallow deposit. Even if it isn't that big, we can probably do something with it. And I should step back a minute and point out that the chairman of this company, Bill Fisher, who I've known for years, Bill, well, he's probably well known to a lot of people because he was chairman of another little company called Aurelian that a few people did well on. But he was also, more to the point in this case, he was a chairman of a company called Globestar. They drilled up a VMS deposit over closer to Pueblo Viejo, developed it, put it in production, and it got taken over by an Australian company for about $350 a couple of years ago. The guy running the company with them, sort of the COO, the operations guy that ran things in the Dominican, was a guy named by the name of Julio Espaillat. Julio is also a geologist. They did a great job at Globestar getting this mine in on time, under budget. Really nice, profitable little mine. Not big, but it's a really nice operation. He brought Julio over to GoldQuest after he came. Julio's the president now. If you want to have 2 guys find you something in the DR and actually be able to do something with it, that's the 2 guys you want to have.
Well, and the point you're making in summary is Bill was behind Aurelian that went to $40 a share, wasn't it? And Julio's taking something into production in Dominican Republic. So they've got the background, they've got the history.
Himself, yeah, he's a geologist and he's a local. And yeah, I mean, if you want to find 2 guys that know how to do it, because before Aurelian, Bill's background was large company stuff. So they both have, and so is Julio's, they both have a lot of experience actually taking things through development. So when you're a junior and you make a discovery, one of the most important things to be able to do is to convincingly tell the market that if we don't sell this thing, we'll just do it. Most of these guys don't want to just do it, obviously. They want to sell it. I mean, they want to find something. They want the stock to go to $10, and they want somebody to take them out, and then they all go to the beach. But in order to be able to do that and get to the $10 and stay there, you've got to convincingly be able to say to the market, we as a group can do this. We don't need the majors. They have to come and write a check to make this happen.
And these guys have done it before.
And these guys have done it before. They can look people in the eyes and say that, and it's believable because they've done it. So that's, where's it going to go now? I mean, it's a drill spec. It's still a drill spec. They still don't know the geometry, but really, if you look at the size of the anomaly, and that's really all we got to go on. It's a 4 by 600 meter anomaly. It looks, based on all I've got to go on is sort of contacts, and they're gradational contacts at that in the geology, but it looks flat. So, and they're drilling vertical holes. I mean, if you're getting stuff like that and it's even anywhere near the size of that anomaly, it's going to be a huge deposit. Plus, if you go back to Escandalosa, where they already have 400,000 ounces, if you look at the IP there, IP is designed so that when you do an IP survey, you do these different separations with you put your put your anodes into the ground, you put charge into them, and you do readings, and basically depending on which ones you're doing the readings off, if you look deeper and deeper and deeper. The geophysicist kind of went back, the guy that targeted Romero, he went back and basically did slices deeper than they've drilled at Escandalosa. And if you really want to fantasize, the geophysics basically looks the same. Escandalosa looks like the top layer of Romero. Is there something like that under it? I don't know, but are they going to try to find out? Yeah. That's why they're bringing a rig in that can do 700 meters.
Right, and they brought in a second drill rig that's already working. Got a third one coming on. When would you expect more drill results to come?
I think they're going to do. I think they'd like to do the next 3 25-meter step outs. I think they'd like to do those as a batch. So the first one of those 3 is in the lab for sure. The second one probably is. The third one, I know they were still logging. Their turnaround time, I think, is a couple of weeks. So let's say 3 weeks, somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks. They may decide to put something out quicker, but I think they may just tell the lab, don't send anything till we've got all of these holes done. Because, well, I don't think this is what happened. I know this is what happened. The first drill hole, I think they were kind of thinking we'll do the first 2 or 3 holes, and I think the first hole looked so good that basically the board and the lawyer just went, you have to put this out. You can't sit on it.
Yeah, it's material. You have to disclose it immediately.
Yeah, and these are like, I mean, one thing, if you go back and look at GoldQuest charts, which is really impressive to me, You go back and look at the chart before they put the first hole out, that stock was 6-7 cents, no real volume. And when you look at the core that first hole generated, I mean, there had to be a lot of guys that looked at that core and went, holy crap. Mm-hmm. And not a word got out to anybody. Yeah. I mean, very professional guys. Mm-hmm.
Very professional. Well, and there's other companies too I want to talk to you about. We'll have to save that for another interview. Okay. Thank you very much, Eric, for being with us. Again, that's Eric Coffin of Hard Rock Analyst. My name is Scott Gibson with Beneath the Surface. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.